My name's Daniel Miller, but most people just called me Danny. Back home in Chicago, guys on the floor used to shout, "Danny from the pits," whenever they saw me. It was half a joke, half respect. See, I didn't come from the kind of family that produced traders or bankers. My dad worked in a factory his whole life. Steel, loud machines, grease under his fingernails that never really washed off. My mom cleaned houses. We lived in a small two-bedroom place on the south side. Nothing fancy, but we made it work. Money was always tight, though. I remember overhearing arguments about bills when I was a kid. Maybe that's why I became obsessed with numbers early on. While other kids were outside playing baseball, I'd be at the library, flipping through the financial section of the newspaper, trying to figure out why corn went up one week and down the next. Nobody taught me that stuff. I just wanted to understand how money moved. By the late 90s, I finally got a shot at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Not as a trader, no, I wasn't that lucky. I started at the very bottom, a runner. My job was basically to carry tickets from one guy to another and grab coffee when someone barked at me. You ever see those old movies where everyone in the pit is screaming, waving their arms, papers flying everywhere? That's exactly what it was like. Chaos, pure chaos. At first, I hated it. I'd go home with my shirt soaked in sweat, my voice gone from shouting. But while everyone else was losing their heads, I started noticing patterns. The way one guy twitched before making a big order. The hesitation in another's voice when he wasn't sure. The pits were like a living organism, and if you paid attention, you could feel when they were about to turn. I'd finish my shift and then sneak into the back office at night to study. Old charts, news clippings, whatever I could get my hands on. Some of the older traders laughed at me, said I was wasting my time, but I kept at it. Then came my first break. I scraped together enough money to make a small trade in corn futures. Nothing big. Honestly, I was terrified. My hands shook when I placed the order. But I had this gut feeling the price was about to jump because of some drought reports I'd read. And I was right. When I walked out of that pit with a profit at 10 grand, I swear I felt like I just robbed a bank. 10 grand might not sound like much on Wall Street, but for me, at 25, it was everything. That win changed everything. Suddenly, guys who never looked at me before started asking what I thought about the market. I wasn't just Danny the runner anymore. I was a player. But as proud as I was, I knew Chicago was just the beginning. I'd stand on the steps outside the exchange, looking at the skyline, and think about New York, about Wall Street. That was the real stage, the big leagues. Chicago was teaching me how to fight, but New York, that was where I could become somebody. When I told my mom I wanted to move to Manhattan, she cried. She said, "Danny, you've already made it. Why risk everything?" But I couldn't stop myself. I had this fire inside me, like if I didn't try, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So in 2002, I packed up my life into 2 suitcases. Emily, my wife, we'd gotten married young, probably too young, stood by me through it all. She believed in me even when I doubted myself. Together, we got on a plane with more dreams than dollars, and we left Chicago behind. I told myself this was it, the next chapter. The big gamble. And like every gamble, I thought I couldn't lose. When Emily and I landed in New York in 2002, I thought I'd stepped into another universe. Chicago had its own kind of energy, loud, gritty, industrial. But Manhattan buzzed like electricity. The streets never seemed to sleep. The glass towers caught the sunlight like they were built from gold. And everyone walked twice as fast as me. We rented a tiny apartment in Queens at first. Paper-thin walls, a kitchen the size of a closet. Emily didn't complain once. She said, "It's not forever, Danny, just the first step." She believed that one day we'd move into one of those glossy apartments downtown. I promised her we would. Getting onto Wall Street wasn't easy. I had some connections from Chicago, but New York firms didn't care about small-time traders from the Midwest. They wanted killers. They wanted sharks. I still remember my first interview. A senior guy in a $3,000 suit leaned across the desk and asked, "What makes you think you can survive here?" I didn't have some polished Ivy League answer. I just said, Because I already survived Chicago. He laughed, but I got the job. The first day I walked into the trading floor, I swear my knees went weak. The place looked like a war room. Rows of glowing monitors, phones ringing off the hook, people shouting numbers faster than I could process. Compared to the noisy pits in Chicago, this was cleaner, sharper, more high-tech. But the tension in the air was the same. You could feel greed and fear bouncing around the room like static. At first, I kept my head down, took small positions, watched, learned who the real players were. And then, one day, I made a call on a tech stock right before earnings. Everyone else thought it was a loser, but I'd been digging through reports and felt something was off. I bet big, and when the numbers came out, I was right. The stock shot up, and I made more in a week than some of the older guys made in a month. That was it. Overnight, I became the kid from Chicago. They started calling me the Golden Boy. People invited me to drinks, slapped me on the back, asked what my secret was. Truth was, I didn't have one. I just worked harder than anyone else. While others were at bars at 2 a.m., I was at my desk running through data, circling numbers until my eyes burned. Emily noticed the change. She'd wait up for me some nights, sitting on the couch in our shoebox apartment with a plate of cold pasta, asking, was it worth it? I'd tell her it was just temporary, that soon all her patience would pay off. And when I finally bought her that Tribeca loft a year later, she smiled like the whole struggle had been worth it. But even with the success, there were warning signs. Older traders, guys with gray hair and scarred voices, would pull me aside and say things like, "Kid, enjoy the spotlight, but don't think it'll last forever." One of them, Mark Levin, a grizzled veteran with eyes like a hawk, told me over a whiskey one night, "Wall Street loves you today, Danny. Tomorrow, it'll chew you up and spit you out." I laughed it off. I thought he was just bitter. I was too busy winning to think about losing. Still, deep down, I felt it. The market was a beast I didn't fully control. I could ride it, maybe even tame it for a while, but it wasn't mine. It belonged to nobody. And yet, in those early years, I couldn't stop. I was addicted. Addicted to the rush of seeing a trade explode in my favor. Addicted to the way people looked at me when I walked into a room. For a kid from the South Side, finally being somebody was a high no drug could match. The jungle of Wall Street had welcomed me in, and I thought I'd become king. But kings don't last forever. Those first few years on Wall Street felt like living inside a movie. Every morning, I'd step into that glass tower downtown, surrounded by men in tailored suits and women who looked like they belonged in magazines, and I thought, I made it. The money came fast, faster than I ever dreamed. In Chicago, making 10 grand on a trade felt like hitting the lottery. In New York, 10 grand was just lunch money. There were days I cleared 100,000 before noon. Emily and I moved out of that cramped Queens apartment into a sleek loft in Tribeca. Exposed brick, big windows, the whole New York fantasy. I bought a black Porsche I barely drove because I was always in the office, and Emily decorated the place like something out of a design magazine. She'd walk me through the rooms, pointing at furniture and laughing, "Can you believe this is ours?" I'd kiss her forehead and say, "It's only the beginning." But the truth is, it wasn't about the apartment or the car. What hooked me was the respect, the recognition, the way people leaned in when I spoke at meetings, the way my phone buzzed nonstop with invitations to dinners, parties, golf outings in the Hamptons. For the first time in my life, people wanted me. Danny Miller, the golden boy from Chicago. I got swept up in it. Nights blurred into mornings. Dinners at steakhouses with men who drank $1,000 bottles of wine like it was water. Weekend getaways on boats I could never have imagined owning. I'd sit there on the deck with the city skyline behind me, glass of champagne in hand, thinking about the kid I used to be, the one who clipped coupons with his mom at the grocery store. That kid wouldn't even recognize me. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. See, success on Wall Street is like standing on a surfboard. You're riding high, showing off, thinking you've mastered the waves.
But deep down, you know one wrong move and you're under. I started feeling it in my chest, this tightness I couldn't shake. The trades were still working, but every decision carried more weight, more risk. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and check futures on my phone, heart pounding like a drum. Emily saw it. She always did. She'd sit me down at the kitchen island late at night when my suit jacket was still on and my tie half undone, and she'd say, "Danny, you've got to slow down. Money's not everything. I don't care if we live in a shoebox. I just want you healthy." I'd nod, hold her hand, promise her I'd cut back. But the next morning, I was right back at my desk before sunrise, chasing the next big win. I couldn't stop. I told myself I was doing it for us, for our future. But if I'm being honest, I was doing it for me. For the rush, for the validation, for the need to prove I belonged at the top. There's one night I'll never forget. A client had invited me to a private club uptown. Crystal chandeliers, cigars thicker than my thumb, a room full of men laughing too loud. I stepped out for some air, and Mark Levin, the old trader who'd warned me once before, was leaning against the wall. He looked at me, eyes tired, and said, "You think they're your friends, Danny. They're not. They love your wins, not you. Remember that." I laughed, told him he was too cynical. But his words stuck with me. Back then, though, I pushed him aside. I told myself he was just an old man, bitter that his time had passed. I was young, I was winning, and I was unstoppable.
Or at least, I thought I was. What I didn't know was that the same wave that carried me so high was already starting to curl, ready to crash. If the early 2000s felt like a rocket launch, then 2008 was the moment the fuel ran out and the whole thing came crashing back to Earth. By then, I was at the top of my game, or so I thought. I had a reputation as the guy who could sniff out profit where others saw nothing. But behind the champagne smiles and glowing screens, the market was rotting from the inside. Everyone could feel it, but nobody wanted to admit it. Housing prices kept climbing, banks kept lending, and we kept telling ourselves the music would never stop. I remember the first time I really noticed something was off. It was a Tuesday morning in late 2007. A mortgage-backed security I'd been watching suddenly tanked out of nowhere. I brushed it off as a blip, told myself the rebound was coming. That was my first mistake, believing I was smarter than the tide. By early 2008, the panic was undeniable. Credit froze, stocks bled red. You could feel the fear on the floor, thick in the air like smoke. Phones rang and rang, traders barked orders with desperation instead of confidence. And me? I doubled down. Markets always bounce back, I told myself. This is just noise. I poured millions into positions I believed in. I told Emily not to worry, that this was just another storm we'd ride out. She asked me one night at the dinner table, "Danny, what if you're wrong?" I kissed her hand and said, "I've never been wrong before." But this time, I was. One Monday morning, I walked into the office and half my positions were gone, wiped out overnight. The screens lit up red, numbers plunging faster than I could blink. I sat there, frozen, watching years of work dissolve in front of me. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I tried to fight it. I bought more, hoping to catch the rebound. But the rebound never came. Every day, the hole got deeper. By the end of the month, I wasn't the golden boy anymore. I was just another trader who flew too close to the sun and melted. The firm turned cold overnight. The same people who once cheered me on now avoided eye contact in the hallway. My phone, which used to buzz nonstop with calls and invitations, went silent. The rooftop parties, the golf outings, the friends, all gone. There's one memory that still stings. It was late evening after another brutal day. I sat in the marble lobby of our office building, tie undone, staring at the floor like it could give me answers. Mark Levin walked by. He didn't gloat, didn't sneer. He just put a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "I told you, kid, Wall Street loves you
until it doesn't. Then he walked away, and I realized he was right. At home, Emily was waiting. I was ready for her to scream, to pack her bags, to tell me she was done. Instead, she sat me down at the kitchen table, poured me a glass of water, and said, "Danny, we'll figure it out. We still have each other."
Her words hit me harder than the losses, because deep down I knew she was right. The money was gone. The respect, the spotlight, the Porsche, the loft, all of it had slipped through my fingers. But there she was, still holding my hand. In that moment, I realized something that Wall Street never taught me. Success is rented, and the rent is due every single day. And when you stop paying, when the wins stop coming, the market doesn't just take your money, it takes your identity too. After the crash, life got quieter. We sold the loft, the Porsche, most of what we owned. For the first time in years, there were no late-night calls, no flashing screens, no adrenaline rush, just silence. At first, that silence scared me. I didn't know who I was without the noise, without the wins. But Emily, she never let go. She reminded me that I was more than a trader, more than the golden boy. I was her husband, her partner. I took a job teaching finance at a community college. The pay was modest, but the work felt real. I started running in the mornings, cooking dinner with Emily, even calling my mom more often. Slowly, I remembered how to just live. Sometimes, I still miss the rush, the spotlight. But I know now it was never love. It was just the market using me. Emily stayed when the market didn't. And that's the truth. Money fades, titles fade, but the people who sit with you when everything's gone, those are the ones who really matter.